A rich guy tries to run over this 4-year-old beggar girl with a Ferrari, but the horse sees it, jumps on the car, and something happens. Comment. What you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support. My work, your help is very important. The sun hadn't even risen yet when Lily Thompson, just 4 years old, woke up to the sound of the motel door closing. Her brown eyes, still heavy with sleep, searched for her mom in the small, stuffy room where they'd been staying for 3 weeks. The bed next to hers was empty, the blankets thrown haphazardly on the old wooden floor. On the scratched wooden table, a crumpled piece of paper caught her eye. Lily couldn't read, but she recognized her mom's messy handwriting scribbled in a hurry. Her small hands trembled as she held the note, instinctively feeling that something terrible had happened. The silence of the motel was different that day, heavier, scarier. Barefoot, in the faded pink dress she'd been wearing for days, Lily left the room and went down the creaky stairs. Mrs. Davis, the motel owner, was sweeping the porch with mechanical movements, avoiding looking at the girl. "Where's Mommy?" Lily asked, her small voice echoing in the empty courtyard. Mrs. Davis stopped sweeping and sighed deeply. "She's gone, honey. Said she had some things to take care of and that she'd be back soon." But Lily knew that her mum wouldn't be back. There was something in Mrs. Davis's eyes, a sadness mixed with anger that screamed the truth that no one wanted to say. In the last few days, her mom had become increasingly nervous, always looking out the window, startled by any noise on the street. For 3 days, Lily waited. She ate the leftovers that Mrs. Davis offered her out of pity, slept in the empty room, and spent the hours sitting on the porch watching the dirt road of Harmony Creek. Her hopes dwindled with each pickup truck that passed without stopping, each person who walked by without looking at her. On the 3rd day, Mrs. Davis approached with a grave expression. "Lily, I need to talk to you. Your mom, she won't be back anytime soon, and I can't keep you here without payment." The words fell like stones on the little girl's chest. Lily understood that she was alone in the world, abandoned like a puppy, that no one wanted. Her tears began to fall silently as Mrs. Davis continued talking about not being able to afford it, about needing the room for other guests. "But I can stay really small in the corner," Lily pleaded, her voice breaking. "I won't bother anyone." Mrs. Davis's heart ached, but she had already made her decision. She couldn't feed an abandoned child when she could barely support the motel. "There's a church downtown, honey. They'll take care of you there." Lily knew that she was being lied to again. In the last few days, she had heard Mrs. Davis talking to the other women about abandoned children, about how difficult it was to find someone who wanted to take care of another mouth to feed. The church was far away, and she didn't know the way. When Mrs. Davis went back into the motel, Lily gathered the few things she had, a battered teddy bear and a doll without an arm, and went out onto the dirt road. Her small feet kicked up dust with every step, and the strong midday sun began to burn her delicate skin. The houses of Harmony Creek were simple, with small gardens and low fences. Some people watched her with curiosity, but no one stopped to ask what such a small child was doing alone on the street. Lily walked aimlessly, just following the instinct to get away from the motel where she had been rejected. Her empty stomach ached and thirst began to tighten her throat. Lily found a public fountain in the center of town and drank water with her hands, wetting her dress in the process. Some older children were playing in the square, but when she approached, they moved away, whispering among themselves about the dirty girl who appeared out of nowhere. By dusk, Lily was exhausted. Her small feet were sore from the pebbles on the streets, and she couldn't hold back the tears any longer. She sat under a tree on the side of the road leading out of town, hugging the teddy bear against her chest. It was then that she heard the sound of an engine approaching. A red car, shiny like blood, was coming at high speed down the dirt road. Lily raised her head, hoping that maybe it was someone who could help her. But there was something in the sound of that engine, something threatening, that made her heart race. The car didn't slow down. On the contrary, it seemed to be coming directly towards her, as if the driver intended not to stop. Lily was paralyzed, her brown eyes fixed on the headlights that were approaching like two mouths of fire, ready to devour her. Time seemed to stop when Lily saw the red car accelerate directly towards her. Her 4 years of life didn't give her the experience to fully understand the danger, but her instinct screamed to run. Her small legs, however, seemed stuck to the dirt floor. Richard Sterling, 62 years old, pressed the accelerator of his Ferrari with a cold expression on his tanned face, his dark eyes fixed on the girl as if she were just an obstacle in his path. Little by little, a cruel smile formed on his lips as the speedometer climbed. It was then that a miracle happened. From the field next to the road, a white horse with an immaculate coat jumped over the barbed wire fence with impressive agility. The animal, about 8 years old with defined muscles under its light skin, had been grazing peacefully when it noticed the imminent danger. Its protective instincts, developed over years of caring for younger foals, awakened instantly. The horse stood between the vehicle and Lily at the exact moment that Sterling floored the accelerator. The impact was brutal. The sound of metal meeting, flesh and bone, echoed through the empty road like a dry thunder. The animal was thrown several meters, rolling across the asphalt, while Lily was pushed away by the force of the shock. Sterling felt the steering wheel shake in his hands when the Ferrari's bumper hit the horse. For a split second, his eyes met the girl's through the windshield. She was alive, just scared and dirty, looking at him with an expression of terror that should have touched any human heart. But Richard Sterling didn't possess a human heart. Without hesitating, he stepped on the accelerator again and fled at high speed, leaving a cloud of red dust in the air. The sound of the engine gradually fading away was replaced by a disturbing silence, broken only by the low moans of the injured horse. Lily crawled to where the animal had fallen. Her clothes were torn, and she had small cuts on her arms and legs, but nothing serious. The horse, however, was badly hurt. Its hind legs trembled uncontrollably, and there was blood running from wounds on its left flank. Horsey, Lily murmured, her small hands gently touching the animal's snout. The horse opened its eyes, two deep, gentle brown orbs, and looked at her with an expression that seemed almost human in its understanding. The animal made an immense effort to raise its head and sniff the girl's hands. Despite the pain it was certainly feeling, there was something maternal in its behavior, as if it recognized that this child needed protection as much as it needed care. For the next few hours, Lily remained by the injured horse's side. When thirst tightened her throat, she found a puddle of rainwater from the previous day and brought some in her small hands to wet the animal's lips. When hunger arrived, she looked for food in the surrounding area. Behind the town's bakery, Lily found some pieces of hard bread that had been thrown in the trash. She picked up everything she could carry and ran back to the horse. She chewed a small piece and offered another to the animal, equally dividing the few resources she could find. The first day was the most difficult. The horse could barely keep its eyes open, and Lily cried softly whenever she saw the blood on its white coat. She tore pieces of her dress to try to clean the wounds, whispering words of comfort that she had heard her mom use when she was sick. "You're gonna be okay, horsey. Lily's gonna take care of you." During the night, the temperature dropped drastically. Lily curled up against the horse's warm body, and it, even injured, curved its neck around her like a protective blanket. They dozed together under the fig tree, two abandoned beings, finding comfort in each other. On the second day, the horse managed to lift its head more easily. Lily had found more bread in the bakery's trash, and also some mashed fruits that the merchant had discarded. She ate little, always saving most of it for her new friend. People began to notice the girl and the injured horse on the side of the road. Some stopped to look with curiosity, others shook their heads in disapproval, but no one offered real help. Harmony Creek was a small town where each family already had its own problems to solve. On the third day, Lily was visibly weaker. Her lips were dry, and she had developed a dry cough that made her shiver. The horse, noticing the girl's deteriorated state, made a heroic effort to stand on its front legs, as if trying to draw attention to their situation. It was then that Eleanor Peterson appeared on the road. The 58-year-old woman was walking to work at City Hall when she saw the scene that would break anyone's heart, a little girl too young to be alone in the world, hugging an injured horse, both clearly. In a desperate situation, Eleanor stopped and looked around, hoping to see some adult responsible for that child. When she realized that they were truly abandoned, her maternal instinct, dormant since she lost her own son years ago, awakened with full force. "My God," she whispered, approaching slowly so as not to scare the girl. "What happened here?" Eleanor Peterson knelt beside Lily and the injured horse, her eyes filling with tears as she saw the deplorable state in which they both found themselves. The girl was dirty, malnourished and shivering with fever, while the animal breathed with difficulty, its open wounds attracting flies under the scorching sun. "What's your name, sweetie?" Eleanor asked in a soft voice, extending her hand slowly. Lily looked at her distrustfully, her arms tightening even more around the horse's neck. In the last few days, several people had stopped to look, but none had offered real help. Her experience with adults wasn't the best. First, her mom abandoned her, then Mrs. Davis kicked her out of the motel. "Horsey hurt," Lily murmured, her voice hoarse from crying so much. "Mean man hit Horsey." Eleanor felt her heart clench. Working at City Hall, she knew well the sad stories that circulated around town, but seeing such a small child in such a situation of abandonment was devastating. Her grey hair swayed as she shook her head, revolted by human cruelty. "We're gonna get out of here," she said, determined. "You both need care, and I'm gonna take care of that." Convincing Lily to leave. The horse was impossible. The girl flatly refused to leave the animal, even when Eleanor explained that they needed to seek help. It was only when she promised that they would come back together to get the horse that Lily finally agreed to go to the woman's house. Eleanor's house was simple, a wooden structure with 3 small rooms on the outskirts of Harmony Creek. There was a backyard with some chickens and a poorly kept vegetable garden, surrounded by a low, peeling wooden fence. It was little, but it was clean and safe. Eleanor bathed Lily, treated the small wounds on her arms and legs, and offered clean clothes that had belonged to her son. The girl ate voraciously the plate of soup that was served to her, but she didn't. "Stop asking about the horse. He's alone, Auntie. He's in pain." "I know, honey. We'll go get him early tomorrow morning, I promise." That first night, Lily barely slept. She stayed at the window of the small room that Eleanor had prepared for her, looking in the direction of the road where she had left her protector. Every noise of the night made her jump, imagining that something terrible was happening to the horse. The next morning, Eleanor kept her promise. They returned to the road carrying a wheelbarrow borrowed from the neighbor. The horse was weaker, but its eyes lit up when it saw Lily approaching. The girl ran to him, hugging his neck tightly. "You came to get us, Horsey. I knew you wouldn't leave." Transporting the animal was a Herculean task. Eleanor needed the help of 2 men who were passing by in a truck to put the horse in the wheelbarrow. The animal was heavy, and its wounds bled again with the movement, but it remained calm, as if it understood that they were trying to help him. In the backyard of Eleanor's house, they improvised a shelter for the horse using old boards and tarpaulin. Lily didn't leave his side for a minute, helping to clean the wounds with wet cloths and offering water and grass that she cut with her own hands. It was during these first days of care that something worrying began to happen. Lily stopped talking. To Eleanor, the girl answered questions with nods or gestures, but her words were reserved exclusively for the horse. She whispered in its ear, told stories softly, and even sang lullabies that her mum used to sing. "Why don't you talk to me, sweetie?" Eleanor asked, worried. Lily looked at her with her serious brown eyes, but remained silent. It was as if, after being abandoned by all the adults in her life, she only trusted the animal that had risked its own life to save her. The horse, in turn, seemed to understand perfectly what Lily was saying. When she whispered that she was thirsty, he gently pushed the bucket of water towards her. When she cried, missing her mum, he rested his head on her lap, offering the only comfort he could give. The first weeks were extremely difficult for Eleanor. Besides taking care of a traumatized child, she needed to find resources to treat an injured horse. Veterinary medicine was expensive, and her meager income as a cleaner at City Hall barely covered her own basic needs. Eleanor began to sell her few valuable belongings. First it was her wedding ring, then an old watch she had inherited from her mother. With the money, she bought antibiotics and healing ointments at the vet's office in the next town. She also started working extra shifts, cleaning offices during the wee hours to earn extra cash. The situation became even more complicated when the strange behavior of some people in town began to catch her attention. Old Man Johnson from the bakery asked suspicious questions about Lily during one of her bread purchases. "That little girl you're taking care of, Eleanor. Where's she from anyway?" "Why do you ask, Mr. Johnson?" "Oh, it's just that a man showed up here looking for a lost child. Said he was worried, wanted to help, even offered a reward to anyone who gave information." Eleanor felt a chill down her spine. Rich men didn't usually worry about abandoned children out of the goodness of their hearts, especially in small towns. Like Harmony Creek, there was something wrong with that story. "What did this man look like?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Well-dressed, expensive car, red Ferrari, said his name was Richard. The name echoed in Eleanor's mind like an alarm bell. Richard Sterling was known in the region as a powerful businessman, but there were also rumors about his violent temper and his questionable business methods. What would a man like him want with an abandoned girl? That night, Eleanor watched Lily whispering with the horse in the backyard. The girl told the animal about nightmares she had with a red car that wanted to hurt her. For the first time, Eleanor began to suspect that the accident with the horse might not have been accidental after all. What if someone had tried to hurt Lily on purpose? And what if that same someone was still looking for her? Eleanor looked at the fragile girl hugging the injured horse and made a decision. It didn't matter who this Richard was or how much influence he had in town. She would protect Lily and her horse, even if it cost her everything she had. 3 months had passed since Eleanor brought Lily and the horse home, and the situation was getting increasingly worrying. The animal, which the girl had silently named Snow, began to show serious neurological problems. His movements became uncoordinated, he stumbled constantly, and he had episodes where he seemed completely lost, looking around without recognizing where he was. Lily noticed every change in her protector. When Snow stumbled or fell, she cried desperately. When he had his moments of confusion, she held his snout between her small hands and whispered words of comfort that only he could hear. The connection between them was so deep that the girl seemed to physically feel the animal's pain. The worst began when Lily started refusing food whenever she saw Snow suffering. If the horse couldn't eat due to a crisis, she also fasted. If he showed pain, she pushed the plate of food away, shaking her head with fierce determination. "Honey, you need to eat," Eleanor pleaded, holding a piece of bread with jelly. "Snow gets sad when he sees you weak," but Lily just pointed to the horse and shook her head. It was as if she had decided that if her protector suffered, she should suffer too. This unhealthy connection was leaving the girl dangerously malnourished, her arms getting thinner and thinner and her eyes sunken in a pale little face. Desperate, Eleanor sought help. She heard about Joe Sanders, a 74-year-old retired veterinarian who lived on the other side of town. The man had stopped practicing officially, but he still attended to urgent cases for charity. Eleanor walked to his house on a hot afternoon, taking the last savings she had left. Joe's house was small but well kept, with a garden full of medicinal herbs and a porch where he used to receive animals. The veterinarian was a tall, thin man with white hair and gentle blue eyes behind round glasses. When Eleanor told him about Lily and Snow, he shook his head with concern. "I can't afford a full consultation," Eleanor admitted, embarrassed. "But I can work in exchange, clean your house, take care of the garden. Bring the animal tomorrow morning," Joe said without hesitation. A child and an injured horse shouldn't suffer for lack of money. The next day, transporting Snow to Joe's house was an arduous task. The horse could barely walk straight, his steps were wobbly, and he stopped frequently, seeming to forget where he was going. Lily walked beside him, holding his mane and murmuring words of encouragement. Joe examined Snow with professional care, but Eleanor noticed how his expression became increasingly serious. He palpated the scars on the animal's flank, observed his uncoordinated movements, and tested his reflexes. Finally, he stepped back with a somber expression. "I need to talk to you," he said to Eleanor, indicating that they should move away from the girl. Joe took Eleanor inside the house where they could talk without Lily hearing. His blue eyes were filled with restrained anger when he began to speak. "This horse's injuries weren't caused by a common accident," he said, his voice low but firm. "The pattern of the wounds, the location, the force of the impact. This was intentional. Someone deliberately accelerated against this animal." Eleanor felt the blood run cold in her veins. "Are you sure? I have 50 years of experience treating run-over animals. I know how to distinguish an accident from an attempted homicide." Joe took off his glasses and wiped them nervously. "Whoever did this wanted to kill, and the horse is only alive because he's strong and got lucky." Joe's words confirmed Eleanor's worst fears. If someone had tried to kill Snow intentionally, it meant that they had also tried to harm Lily. The animal only intervened to protect her, saving the girl's life, but paying a terrible price for it. "I need to know more things," Eleanor said, her voice trembling. "If someone wants to harm Lily, I need to understand why." During the following days, Eleanor began to ask discreet questions around town. She spoke with other cleaners, with shopkeepers, with women she met at the market. Little by little, a disturbing pattern began to form. Mrs. Olson, who worked at the pharmacy, told about a 5-year-old girl who had disappeared the previous year. The child was playing near the road when she vanished and was never found again. The poor family didn't have the resources to search, and the local authorities quickly closed the case. Mr. Baker, who drove the only taxi in town, mentioned a 15-year-old teenager who had disappeared 2 years ago. She was returning from school when she simply vanished. Her mother, a single woman who worked as a maid, searched desperately but never found any clues. What made Eleanor even more scared was discovering that both disappearances happened in places where Richard Sterling used to pass with his red Ferrari. The families of the children were all poor, without political influence or resources to push for serious investigations. The final confirmation came when she spoke with Mrs. Gable, an 80-year-old lady who had lived on the main street of a town for decades. The woman had an impressive memory and knew all the secrets of Harmony Creek. "That Richard Sterling has always been a dangerous man," she said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "There are stories about him that no one dares to tell openly. Poor women who worked for him and then disappeared from town. Young girls who appeared bruised after encounters with him. And no one ever did anything?" Eleanor asked, outraged. Who's going to face a rich man in a small town? He has influence, money, connections. The poor families who tried to report ended up being silenced. One way or another, when Eleanor returned home that night, she found Lily sleeping, hugging Snow in the backyard. The girl had refused to have dinner again, in solidarity with the suffering of the horse who had spent the whole day having small muscle spasms. Seeing them together, two innocent creatures suffering because of the cruelty of a powerful man, made Eleanor's heart fill with a rage she had never felt before. But the rage turned into pure terror when, 2 days later, a stranger knocked on her door. The man was tall, about 43 years old, wearing a cheap but well-kept suit. His eyes were small and calculating, and he smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. He introduced himself as Daniel Ferris, a private investigator. "I heard that you're taking care of a girl," he said, his voice soft but menacing. "A child who may be being looked for by worried relatives." Eleanor felt her heart race, but kept her expression neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. A little girl, brown hair, about 4 years old. My client is very worried about her and is willing to pay well for information." Daniel took an envelope out of his pocket. "Very well indeed. Who is your client?" "Someone who has the best interests of the child in mind. Someone who can offer a much better life than—" he looked around Eleanor's simple house with disdain. "Than this here." At that moment, Lily appeared at the back door, coming from the backyard where she was with Snow. When she saw the stranger, her eyes widened in pure terror. She let out a muffled scream and ran back to the backyard, hiding behind the horse. Daniel smiled coldly. "Looks like she recognizes me. Or maybe she recognizes who I represent." Lily's reaction to seeing Daniel confirmed Eleanor's worst fears. The girl not only recognized the man, she feared him deeply, her muffled screams coming from the backyard made Snow neigh nervously, and Eleanor could hear Lily whispering desperate words to the horse. "The child seems scared," Daniel observed with a cruel smile, "perhaps because she knows that it's time to go back to where she belongs." "She's not going anywhere," Eleanor said, closing the door halfway to block the man's view of the backyard. "Mom, you don't understand the situation. My client has resources, influence. He can make life very difficult for anyone who gets in his way." Daniel took a step closer. "Or he can be very generous with those who cooperate." Eleanor slammed the door in his face, but she knew that it was far from over. Through the window, she saw Daniel walk slowly around the house, observing every detail, every possible entrance. He was mapping the terrain like a predator studying its prey. When he finally left, Eleanor ran to the backyard. She found Lily huddled against Snow, trembling violently. The horse seemed to sense the danger. His ears were pricked, and he was staring in the direction where Daniel had disappeared. That night, for the first time in months, Lily spoke to Eleanor. "Aunt Eleanor," she whispered, her voice broken by fear. "Is the bad man going to take Snow away?" "No, honey, no one's going to take you." But Lily shook her head, her brown eyes full of a sad wisdom too much for a 4-year-old child. "The bad man always takes. He took Mommy too." Lily's words hit Eleanor like a punch to the stomach. "How did he take your mommy?" During the early morning hours, between crying spells and moments of terror, Lily recounted fragments of memories she had kept stored away. She remembered her mother working in a big house with golden gates, where a man yelled a lot. She remembered her mother coming home crying, with purple marks on her arms that she tried to hide with long sleeves. "Mommy said the boss was bad, that he hurt the girls who worked there," Lily murmured. "And then Mommy got a big belly, and the bad man got very angry." Eleanor felt her heart breaking as she listened. The story became clearer and more terrible. With each word, Lily's mother had worked as a maid for Richard Sterling, had become pregnant, probably by him, and been forced to leave town. "Why did you come back?" Eleanor asked softly. Mommy said she didn't have any more money, that the bad man had to help with Lily because it was... The girl hesitated, confused, because it was his responsibility. The last piece of the puzzle fell into place in Eleanor's mind. Lily's mother had returned to blackmail Sterling, demanding money to raise her daughter, and he had decided to solve the problem in the most brutal way possible, eliminating both the mother and the child. The next morning, Eleanor made a desperate decision. She couldn't face a man like Richard Sterling. In a legal or social battle, he had too much power and influence. But she could protect Lily and Snow in the only way left, by running away. She remembered the rural property that had belonged to her deceased sister, located a 2-hour walk through the dense forest. The house had been abandoned for years, but it still had a roof and walls. More importantly, it was far enough away from town that Daniel couldn't find them easily. Eleanor packed only the essentials, some clothes, medicine for Snow, and all the non-perishable food she could carry. She left her house during the wee hours when the streets were deserted. Lily walked beside Snow, her small hand intertwined in the horse's mane. The first few miles were quiet. They followed an old trail that cut through the forest, passed by rural workers. Snow walked slowly, but without great difficulty. Lily was excited about the adventure, whispering to the horse about how they would live in a new house, far from the bad men. But halfway there, tragedy struck. Snow was climbing a small rise when his hind legs simply gave way. The horse fell heavily to the ground, his eyes rolled back, showing only the white. Lily screamed desperately, kneeling beside the animal who was convulsing violently. "Snow! Snow, wake up!" cried the girl, her small hands trying to hold the horse's head. Eleanor knew it was a serious neurological sequela. The strain of the walk had triggered a crisis that the animal couldn't control. Snow was conscious. His eyes showed fear and confusion. But his body didn't obey the commands of his brain. The rain started to fall hard, turning the trail into mud. Eleanor tried to build an improvised shelter with branches and clothes, but the cold water was soaking them all. Lily refused to leave Snow, hugging the trembling horse while both got drenched. For 3 days, they remained trapped in that location. Snow couldn't get up, and Lily didn't want to abandon him. The food ran out on the second day, and the water they could collect from the rain wasn't enough. Eleanor saw the girl getting weaker and weaker, her pale skin contrasting with the bluish lips from the cold. On the 3rd day, Lily developed a high fever. She was delirious, calling for her mom and the horse alternately. Snow, even in his weakened state, seemed to understand that the girl was very sick. The animal made an immense effort to keep his head raised, offering his neck as a pillow for the feverish child. Eleanor was desperate. They were in the middle of nowhere, without communication, without transportation, and both Lily and Snow seemed to be dying slowly. She herself had developed a persistent cough that left her breathless, a result of 3 nights sleeping soaked on the forest floor. It was when it started to hail that Eleanor finally admitted to herself they weren't going to survive. Her sister's property was still miles away, and even if they got there, there was no guarantee that they would find adequate shelter or resources to recover. Lily was unconscious most of the time, and Snow could barely open his eyes. Eleanor looked at the girl she had promised to protect and felt the crushing weight of failure. In her attempt to save Lily from Richard Sterling, she may have condemned the child to an even worse fate, a slow and painful death in the cold forest. Hugging Lily against her chest, with Snow lying next to them under the relentless rain, Eleanor whispered a desperate prayer. She wasn't a very religious woman, but at that moment she needed to believe that someone, somewhere, was listening. "If there's a God," she murmured, "please don't let this child suffer anymore. She's already been through so much." The cold forest wind was her only answer, carrying with it the distant sound of footsteps approaching along the muddy trail. The footsteps on the muddy trail became clearer, and Eleanor held Lily tighter, preparing for the worst. Her exhausted mind imagined Daniel or even Richard Sterling having managed to track them down there. But when the figure emerged from the rain, she could hardly believe what she saw. Joe Sanders was walking along the trail carrying a vet bag and a heavy backpack. The 74-year-old man was soaked and clearly exhausted, but his blue eyes shone with determination. Behind him came his neighbor, a younger man, carrying supplies. "My God," Joe murmured when he saw their condition. "I knew you were in danger." Joe quickly explained that he had become worried when Eleanor didn't show up for the arranged work at his house. Knowing the town gossip well, he had heard about Daniel's visit and suspected that something serious was happening. Following clues from the neighbors, he had discovered the direction they had taken. "But how did you find us?" Eleanor asked, still in disbelief. "I've known this trail since I was a boy, and I knew you would remember your sister's property." Joe knelt beside Snow, his experienced hands quickly examining the animal. "I brought medicine, antibiotics, everything you need." While Joe took care of Snow, applying injections that calmed the horse's convulsions, he told Eleanor about surprising developments that had happened in town. "Richard Sterling is being investigated," he said, his voice low so as not to wake Lily. "The regional prosecutor's office received anonymous reports about his activities. Several women have finally found the courage to speak." Joe revealed that he had risked secretly collecting documents and evidence about Sterling's crimes. As a respected veterinarian in the region, he had access to information that others couldn't obtain. He discovered records of suspicious payments made by the businessman to poor women, always followed by their disappearance from town. "Lily's mother wasn't the first," Joe continued. "I found at least 5 similar cases in the last 10 years. Women who worked for him got pregnant and then simply vanished. The most shocking thing was the discovery that Daniel Ferris had been arrested the night before. The private investigator was found trying to bribe City Hall employees to obtain information about the whereabouts of Eleanor and Lily. During the interrogation, he ended up revealing details about his illegal activities in Sterling's service. He confessed everything," Joe said with grim satisfaction. "He admitted that Sterling had ordered him to solve the problem of the girl definitively. The recording of the confession was what the prosecutor's office needed to issue the arrest warrant. Richard Sterling had been arrested at his mansion that same morning. The search of his property revealed disturbing evidence, false documents, blackmail records, and even personal items that had belonged to the missing women. The businessman who thought he was untouchable discovered that his empire of terror had completely collapsed. Joe administered antibiotics to Lily to combat the pneumonia that was developing, and gradually the girl's fever began to decrease. Snow also responded well to the medication, finally managing to lift his head and drink water on his own. During the following days on the abandoned property, which Joe and his helper quickly made habitable, Lily began to recover physically and emotionally. For the first time since her mother's abandonment, she began to speak normally again, not only with Snow, but with everyone around her. "Aunt Eleanor," she said on a sunny morning, "is Snow better? Is he not going to be in pain anymore?" "He's going to get much better, honey, and you'll never have to hide again." Snow's recovery was gradual but constant. With proper medication and regular veterinary care, his neurological sequelae decreased significantly. He still stumbled occasionally, but he returned to walking confidently, and his moments of confusion became rare. 3 months later, when they finally returned to Harmony Creek, they found a transformed town. Richard Sterling's arrest had broken a cycle of fear that had lasted for decades. Other families finally felt safe to tell their own stories of suffering at the hands of the businessman. A solidarity campaign organized by the residents raised funds to ensure the continued treatment of Snow and the well-being of Lily. The child who had been abandoned and almost murdered became a symbol of resistance and hope for the entire community. Eleanor officially obtained custody of Lily through a legal process that took into account the mother's abandonment and the non-existence of other relatives. The decision was unanimous. Everyone recognized that the girl had found her true family in Eleanor and Snow. Eleanor's sister's rural property was renovated with the help of the community, transforming it into a true home where Lily could grow up in safety. The spacious backyard allowed Snow to graze freely, and the girl finally had space to be a child. Joe became a constant presence in their lives, not only as Snow's veterinarian, but as a father figure for Lily. The single man discovered in the girl the family he never had, and she found in him the stability and affection that her own father never offered. A year after the accident that almost destroyed their lives, Lily was unrecognizable. Her brown hair shone healthily, her laughter echoed through the backyard, and she had developed a curious and determined personality. She still maintained a special connection with Snow. The horse continued to be her best friend and protector. But now she also played with other children and attended the local school. Richard Sterling was sentenced to 30 years in prison on multiple charges, including attempted murder, coercion, blackmail, and exploitation of vulnerable people. His fortune was confiscated to compensate the families of his victims. The man who once terrorized an entire town now languished in a small cell, his arrogance transformed into despair. Daniel Ferris was also convicted as an accomplice, receiving 10 years in prison. During the trial, he pleaded for forgiveness, claiming that he was only following orders, but the judge was implacable. Justice had finally reached those who thought they were above the law. On a golden autumn afternoon, Lily ran through the field while Snow trotted beside her, his movements almost completely normal. Eleanor watched them from the porch, knitting a new sweater for the girl she now affectionately called her daughter. "Aunt Eleanor!" Lily shouted, running towards her with a bouquet of wildflowers. "Snow, help me choose the prettiest ones for you." Eleanor hugged the girl, feeling her heart overflow with gratitude. They had lost so much, Lily her biological mother, Eleanor her previous life. But they had found something much more valuable, a true family forged by love and overcoming. Snow approached the porch and gently touched Eleanor's hand with his snout, as if he also wanted to participate in the embrace. The horse, who had risked everything to save a stranger child, now lived in peace, surrounded by the love of those he had protected. As the sun set over the green fields of Harmony Creek, 3 survivors, a woman, a child, and a horse, silently celebrated the victory of good over evil, of love over hate, of hope over despair. Their lives, marked forever by tragedy and overcoming, had finally found the peace they deserved.